I'm Cassidy Quinn, and this is Mentally Together. Because whether you can see it on the surface or not, we are all just trying to keep ourselves mentally together. And no matter what our brains are experiencing, we're not alone, we're together. This is part 2 of the compilation I started to put out last week, where I went back and listened to every episode of this podcast that we put out in 2021, and we had so many wonderful guests that shared things they have learned throughout their lives that help their brains and their bodies feel just a little bit better. So I took one little tidbit, one piece of advice, one philosophy, one thing related to mental health from each of those guests, and decided we would combine them into one big, mental health SparkNotes edition. I thought this would be a nice way to start off the new year, because no, we do not have to do that whole new year, new you thing, make all those New Year's resolutions about how you're gonna be so much better in the world because you sucked last year, right? You gotta improve. No, I am not about that. So just for the record, this is not me telling you that you need to improve or that you need to try any of these things. But for me, these are some of the things that stuck out to me the most. Things that a lot of them I have now incorporated into my own life, and they have definitely helped me on many, many days. And so maybe, just maybe, they might help you feel a little better or even just a little less alone. Last week, we heard from 15 wonderful people, and this week, we will hear from 10 more. So let's get into it. The first one comes from podcaster, creator, comedian, actress, and doer of lots of habits, Nikki Limo. It's actually really funny to me how many little habits that I do in my daily life that started by watching Nikki's YouTube videos. Things like washing my makeup off before I go to sleep. I know I shouldn't be necessarily admitting that I didn't do that before, but I do now, most nights, if I don't fall asleep on the couch. And my bullet journal, which I have grown to love using so much to not only get out some of my thoughts and feelings on paper, but also to organize my tasks and daily life. I first heard about bullet journaling from Nikki. So, here on the podcast, she gave us a little insight as to how she starts putting these new habits into practice.
In an ideal world, who would you want to be? The kind of person that has a really nice, luxurious made bed is part of who I would want to be. I started wearing satin pajamas a lot because it just, I'm like, wow, why can't I be her? Why can't I be that girl that wears satin PJs and goes and sleeps in a luxury bed? And then it's you start doing that with other things too, where you're like, well, what else does this person do? Well, she drinks coffee out of really vintage coffee cups that, or remind her of this one time she went to Italy or whatever it is. You kind of just dream about this character. And then you just slowly, without you even really thinking about it, things just start to come together the way that you think that person would live their life. And then you are that person. And you just are that person, because that's how habits work. You have it, and it's really hard to do at first because it's feels weird and not your normal, not something you normally do. And then after you do it over and over and over and over and over again, that's just part of you now. So when you say something well, I'm just a messy person, or I just don't have enough money to do those things, or I just whatever, you make these little excuses, you're actually just defining the habits that you're comfortable keeping. And that's the person that you're comfortable with being. You're a person that doesn't make their bed. You're a person that doesn't care about their health. If you're I'd like to be a person that goes to the gym, but I'm just not motivated. I'm just not that person. Okay, then you're okay with being a person that doesn't really care about their health. That's just,
yeah.
And those, thinking about it that way makes me more motivated to go to the gym, or not the gym anymore, but to work out or get some sort of exercise in. Cause I'm no, I am. The way he puts it in Atomic Habits, James Clear wrote a book called Atomic Habits, is each choice that you make is a vote for that type of person that you want to be. All you need to do is have more votes in favor of the person you want to be over the person you don't want to be for the change to be made. So if you miss a day, whatever. But if you miss, a month, then you've definitely voted to be the other type of person. And that, just thinking of things that way, help define my choices every day.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're going through depression or anxiety, you're never going to be perfect. Okay. But just thinking of it in the terms of voting. Like, well, I voted twice yesterday for being a workout person. So today I can't work out. Whatever. I'll throw my vote away.
Yeah, got a couple votes this week.
Yeah.
Definitely after we record, gonna like wash my makeup off, gonna be a person that does that, maybe make my bed and do a workout. So I'm gonna vote for those things today.
There you go. Love it. And
I've
it's
heard
just like small changes over time.
just for the record, since this conversation with Nikki, I think I have maybe voted for being a person who makes her bed every day. Maybe 10 times. I don't know if I should admit that, but that one is hard for me. But it actually, when I have done it, has brought me a little joy because I like the bedding I have on my bed. So when I have it all done up, I look at it and go, ooh, look, whoever sleeps in this bed is organized, she's fun, she likes bright colors, and she's got her life together. But on the days that I don't make my bed or do any of the other habits that I want to be a person that does those ones, I remind myself, like Nikki always says, fuck perfect. She literally started a jewelry line about trying to break free of perfectionism. I'm wearing my fuck perfect ring right now. So I will let that just remind me for the rest of this episode. Next, on the subject of habits and starting to do things consistently, one word that pops up a lot is routine. You know, what's your morning routine? What's your nighttime routine? And for me, that has always been very hard because I'm a person who likes variety. Maybe that's the ADHD brain, or maybe that's just being a human. And that is exactly what our next guest talked about. Renee Brooks, aka Black Girl Lost Keys. Renee is also a person with ADHD, and that is what she writes about. That is the wisdom she puts out into the world. I appreciate it so much, and so I very much appreciated how she thinks about routines.
Once you find a solution, that doesn't mean it's always going to be the solution. So you have to be willing to come into new things, and certain solutions, like, I don't know, how you run your morning, like your morning routine. Once that gets stale, you're not going to be interested in it anymore. And it's okay. Like, when people are coming up with routines, I usually tell them to come up with 2 more routines that will suit them equally, so that once that one isn't working anymore, you have a new one to switch into. And when that one doesn't work, you have a new one to switch in. And then you can go back to the original, because all it needs to be is new. You ever do something, you're like, oh my God, I used to do it like this all the time. Let's do it this way. Why did I stop doing that? You stopped doing it because you got bored. The ADHD brain is about stimulation. So accommodate yourself.
I know for me, thinking about routines in this way has made such a difference, because I notice, like, if I get in a workout routine, like, oh, I am really on a yoga kick right now. In a few weeks, I'm going to kind of be sick of doing yoga every single day, and then I'm going to want to start running. Or a few weeks after that, I'll want to start dancing. And initially, when I started noticing those changes, like the tendency for myself to get sick of my routine in whatever part of my life, I would get really frustrated with myself. Like, why can't you just find something you like and stick to it? But no, turns out that is just being a human. And sometimes the novelty of things just wears off, like Renee says. And that is okay. Next, we gotta talk about social anxiety, which maybe you have experienced. The more that I talk about it out loud, the more I realize more people do experience this. But it's something that I have felt for so much of my entire life. And especially in this weird time in the world where we were all stuck at home in our own little bubbles for so long, and now we're out back socializing with other humans, and it's weird to figure out how to talk and when to talk and what to talk about. And so here is a strategy that has been so useful to me after I learned it on this episode with therapist, licensed clinical social worker, Allison Diana.
So I think that what's important is just to sometimes go into I'm going to be an observer. So when I'm feeling social anxiety and I'm in a group of people and I feel like oh, I don't want to have to be the extrovert. I don't want to be making the conversation. Like, I just don't have the energy for that. So I will choose to go into observer mode. I'm going to be like a sponge who's like processing what other people are saying. Like, I want to like observe the dynamics, and I'm going in not like egocentric and not with like, I need to have this sort of amount of tension or this story that I'm going to be telling, and more like I'm like quieting down. That for me helps a little bit. I know that could feel uncomfortable too, because it's like if we're not talking, then that can create anxiety. But
what if everyone goes into observer mode?
everyone's like,
all of my
and
friends
then you're all
cannot
of a
listen to
sudden
this
talking about the
podcast
present
because I
moment.
get to be the one that goes into observer mode. Okay.
It's yours. You go internal, you go into observer mode, and not in a way that's in your head, but in a way of just like, I'm just like pleased to be here. I'm pleased to be experiencing this. I don't have anything to prove. It's okay if I don't have anything to say, or if I'm not in the mood to talk. Like, how can I make myself comfortable in this moment? Is there a person that particularly is giving me good vibes right now? Can I go sit with them and maybe start a one-to-one conversation with them? And so I think like any sort of check-in that you can do with yourself while you're socializing, but also beforehand, like what's an intention that I want to set for myself? Am I in observer mood? And of course, as you get there and you feel more comfortable, you're just going to be your authentic self and go with the flow and probably end up having a great time. But it's that pre-anxiety anticipation that really can get us going. And then ironically can cause us to be more anxious while we're experiencing the socializing. So the check-in beforehand, like what kind of mood am I in? And like, what would make me feel comfortable right now? Am I physically comfortable in what I'm wearing? Have I eaten? Do I need to show up with a bottle of wine? Do I have like these basic things that will help me feel comfortable? What kind of mood am I in? What kind of things maybe should be off topic? Am I going through some hard parts of my life that I kind of maybe don't want to get into? What's a little, I know this probably sounds like way too much thinking, but like, what's a little one-liner that I can have for people if I've lost my job and they're going to ask me that? Like, I can be a little scripted and be prepared to be like, yeah, I'm kind of in between things and working on it, but you know, it's okay. It's been hard, but I'm working on it. Thanks for asking what's new with you, and kind of redirect so that you feel like, okay, I don't want to be asked about this. I don't want to be asked about this. So let me have a little like script plan. Yeah. I know that probably sounds like a lot of thinking, but I do think that those are some good tools.
That's one of those tips that I almost don't even want to put back out here again on the pod, because I feel like if everyone knows it, they're going to know the strategy going on in my head. I mean, please tell everyone you know to listen to this podcast, please, but just tell them to skip that part. Now, speaking to other humans, we have TikToker and news anchor Megan Mitchell. Megan is also in the ADHD club, and she also has OCD and has battled with eating disorders in her life. And one thing that she says has helped her through all of it is just talking to someone.
I think, if you have a partner, if you have like a really good friend, someone that you like, the first person you call when something happens in your life, it's like being super vulnerable and like being very honest about where you are, because I think it can be like really detrimental to be like carrying something and not tell your partner. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, hey, I need to tell you something. I don't even need feedback. I just need to divulge this. With like depression, I'm like, I'm really feeling very sad right now. And so I think that those, just using people in your life as that bouncing board, just to be like, can you just listen, is like also really helpful. And you know what, I should say, for anybody who might not feel like you have someone in your life, but more specifically, someone who can appropriately address those mental health issues, like they've struggled with them themselves, or they're like, if you have someone toxic in your life that like isn't going to address that, I mean, that is where therapy comes in. So if you have the means, really try to look up therapists in your area, which Cassidy and I were just struggling with, finding a therapist is a whole job in itself.
Yeah.
But there are definitely so many solutions to making sure that you're feeling heard.
This is a tip that I think can sound either really simple or really impossible, depending on your situation. Like if you have a therapist, great. You've got someone to talk to. If you have a person in your life, whether it's a friend, a romantic partner, a family member, whoever that you can talk to, that is awesome. But if you do not feel like you have either of those things, this can be easier said than done. But just think about how many humans are out there in the world. and how many humans maybe are struggling with the same thing that you're struggling with right now or have at some point and will understand it. And I believe in you that you can find that person to open up with. I know for me, that has made a huge difference for me. Just having someone that actually understands and listens, and they don't have to tell you that everything is great and it's going to be fine and that you can ignore whatever negative thoughts are in your head. Like, just to talk it through and listen. And that helps so much. Have you been putting off a visit to the doctor of any kind for way too long? I'm talking a flu shot, an x-ray, or even therapy. I know how that feels. You know you need to do it, but sometimes it just seems so difficult. That's why I've started going to ZoomCare. With locations in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Colorado, ZoomCare offers same-day doctor visits that you can book online or from their app. Yep, you don't have to talk to anyone on the phone. They even offer mental health visits where you can speak to a board-certified mental health provider in person or through video. That's how I've been going to therapy this year, all on my webcam from the comfort of my own couch. Oh, that reminds me, I better go book my next session. If you're ready to make an appointment of your own, head to ZoomCare.com. That's ZoomCare.com.
Now, back to the show.
Next, we got to talk to Dr. Stephen Mandel and Sam Mandel, who run Ketamine Clinics Los Angeles. There, they use ketamine infusion therapy to treat depression, anxiety, PTSD, and all kinds of other things in their patients. And if you are struggling with your mental health right now, the Mandels just want you to know that you can get help.
Get treatment if you're suffering. If you don't get treatment from us, get treatment from someone else. Pick someone good. It's a whole other show as to who's good. But don't go with the cheapest or the closest. Go with the best. You're not going to do this a dozen times to pick your favorite. You're going to do this once. Do it right.
Amen to that. You don't need to wait anymore. Life's short. Do whatever you got to do to really get the most out of it and enjoy it.
I just love how they put that. Don't wait. Life is too short to feel so miserable. Sometimes with things like depression and anxiety and all other kinds of mental health conditions, it can feel like it's going to be that way forever. It is never going to get better, and that is just you now. And that's not the case. It doesn't mean that if I wake up tomorrow and go to get a certain kind of treatment, that treatment will work or that the next treatment will work, but there's always something else to try. It might not be easy. It might not be quick. It might not be cheap, but we can always, always, always keep trying. On the next episode, we got to talk to author, illustrator, and yoga teacher Tracy Subisak. When I originally talked to her, when we first put this episode out, she had just released her illustrated book, Jenny May is Sad, which talks all about how to help a friend through a sad time, which is clearly relatable. But another relatable thing is how we all communicate with each other. Obviously, talking to other people is something that comes up all the time on this podcast. And so Tracy taught us about a specific type of communicating that I think can be really useful.
Have you heard of nonviolent communication?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge game changer, I think. Just like I grew up in a household where, English was a second language. So I don't know. I think we were all very direct with everything, which is fine. I think I like it. But yeah. I think that there's also a way to be direct, but also kind of make sure you care for each person in the conversation. And I think that really took communication a step further, and also just the mindset, right? I think that's the biggest thing because that's where the practice comes from.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is nonviolent communication for anybody that doesn't know? Or what does it mean to you?
Nonviolent communication to me is basically taking blame or shame from any statement. And so it's like the makeup of the communication is I feel, and you insert an actual feeling, which is the big thing I learned, which is I feel that you're doing this instead of I feel anxious.
Ooh, yeah, instead of immediately turning it back to the other person, I feel that you are being mean.
Yeah, exactly. Because I definitely used to do that. Like, I was thinking I was being so thoughtful, but it was actually like a little attack. So, I feel a feeling, actual feeling, because, and then then stating the need, because, it's just people don't know. People don't know what's going on unless you express it, which,
yeah.
Imagine.
Sometimes I personally just need to hear that little bit at the end. People don't know what's going on unless we tell them. What a concept. Next up, we have Logan Lynn, talented musician, mental health advocate. By the way, his new album with Kill Rock Stars just came out. It's called New Money. And before we get into this little tidbit from Logan, I do just want to point out one of the things he really started off our whole episode talking about was how he has been through a lot in his life. There have been a lot of years where things were not good. And now things are really good. So good, in fact, that sometimes he feels bad talking about it on the internet because he's like, wow, my life is great. I'm living my best life over here. But like he talks about in this clip, he has been through intense periods of recovery and therapy and just going through it. But at the end of the day, some of the things that have really made the biggest impact on him are the things that seem the most simple.
I think I have some that are probably pretty positive and some that are borderline vice, but still work. I like to shop. I like fashion. I'm going to put that in the borderline vice category. It still works and could be worse.
Yeah.
But I think stuff that I do that anyone can do is I write a lot. I watch a lot of TV. I let myself not have plans. If I don't want to have plans, I reschedule things if I feel like I'm not myself that day. I play with the dog a lot. I love the dog. I think those sort of simple life things are the things that actually end up mattering. I've done like intensive psychological treatment. I've gone in for retreats. I've done a lot of rehab, but ultimately the stuff that makes me feel happy and connected is like talking to my friends on the phone, watching the TV shows I like, then talking to my friends on the phone about that, and the dog feeling happy and feeling like she's got the right outfit on for that day. Like I'm into that.
I'm into that too, Logan, except I don't have any outfits for my dog yet. So that's something I need to work on. Next, we got to hear from artist and mental health advocate Michelle Hammer, who is the founder of Schizophrenic NYC, an apparel company all about starting conversations about mental health. And obviously, as we keep hearing from all of these different guests, there are so many things that we can do, that we can try to make a difference for our mental health. And sometimes the thing that just might help is a medication.
Well, I take my meds every morning. That helps a lot. That's what I would say. Go to the doctor, get the meds right, take them when you're supposed to take them, actually take them. Because there's a lot of people, they get prescribed meds, but they don't like to actually take them. So taking the meds are really important. I would say do that. Yeah.
And I appreciate that you talk about that, but I've also heard you don't talk about the specific meds because it's different for everybody. But sometimes just medication in general can be kind of scary to, go, oh my goodness, it can be. Is it going to change something? But your experience has been good.
Well, I mean, I've been on bazillions and I've thrown many out. So, I mean, you do what works for you. If you try it, you don't like it, then stop that one and try a different one. It's just like when you have a headache, you could take Motrin, Excedrin, Tylenol, just because you don't like one and it doesn't stop your headache doesn't mean you're not going to try a different one. Right. What's the big deal? You can be like, no, I refuse to take any other painkiller because this Excedrin didn't work for my headache. Like, no, it's the same with like an antidepressant or anything like that. Like, I'll never take Prozac or anything because I took lithium and it was terrible. Like same thing, there's all different drugs for a headache and you wouldn't just not take Tylenol because you hate ibuprofen. Same idea.
Or sometimes like I used to have headaches all the time when I was a kid. And so Tylenol stopped working. And so then I switched to aspirin and like that also happens with antidepressants or any other medication. Yeah.
But people would not like ever like associate the two and understand that it's the same idea, you know, like just because you might have like, there's a lot of antidepressants. Just because one might not work for you doesn't mean the other bazillions aren't going to work for you either.
Totally.
You know, test them out, see what works, see what doesn't work. You know,
that's the only way you'll figure it out. Yeah. That's great.
The only way you're going to figure it out. If you just say no, you know, it's not going to work that way, because that's how I used to be. And I know that didn't work. When I noticed, once I started taking my medicine regularly, I saw my life get better. And I was like, I like this life more.
I really appreciate how Michelle talks about all that, how she doesn't actually share which specific medication she's on, but she does talk openly about how much medications have helped her brain in general. For me, I have tried a couple of different antidepressant medications, and they have been very helpful for my brain. I actually just went through the process of switching, which is not fun, but if one is not doing what you want it to, you can try the next one, and that's what I'm doing. So this is not to say that you need to take a medication, or not to say that you should just jump right into one without asking a bunch of questions to whoever's prescribing it to you. But if you do think it would help you out, just remember, you can always try another one. There's not just one option, and if that doesn't work, nope, never again. Now, we talk a lot on this podcast about asking for help, and how sometimes that is the hardest part about getting help and figuring out your mental health, is just saying it out loud to someone, saying, I need help right now. And that is a lot of what we talked about with creator, storyteller, Gen Z's journalist, Malik Mercier. And Malik has had the experience of knowing he needs help, asking for help, and then once you take that step, it's actually kind of more complicated than you want it to be.
In high school, like, was watching it on the projector board, and I was like, I went up to my teacher at the end and was just like, I really like think I might have this. Like, I think I need help. And so she was just like, you know, oh, like, then you should definitely like talk to your regular doctor, and like try to get help through her, which now like, and it's not her fault, but that's like sending me now to another person. So now you have to like continue to be courageous and ask for help. It's not like you find
like,
out.
I thought I did it.
Yeah. I feel like that's what it's made out to be, that like the moment you talk to someone, like you're going to be like on, like they're going to connect you, and like it's just going to be magical.
Yes.
That was not at all it. And I think for me, it was just like a lot of like not wanting to touch, like, cause I have contamination-based OCD. I feel like I actually also have like others, but that's the one I focused on with my therapist. And like, it just was not wanting to like touch certain things in high school, and not wanting to like touch papers and past papers. And it also just got worse over time, which I feel like, I don't know if people realize that, but it's kind of like if you were to just leave your leg, and I'm sure you've used an analogy like this, just like untreated with a wound, it's not going to get better. And so it just got worse and more complicated. And I feel like, especially living in New York City and going to high school with like I think we had like 2,700 students. Like, it wasn't it wasn't like none of it's clean to begin with. Right?
Yeah.
Like, the trains aren't clean. And now we know that the trains weren't being cleaned at all before the pandemic. So it was just very, and also translated to that, like not wanting to hold the train rails, but like trains moving. So you should probably do that, right? Like a lot of different little things. And so finally went to my doctor, who recommended a therapist, but then I feel like just something got lost that first time. Like, I just never had the courage to call myself. And I feel like my family just was very like not wanting to believe that there was something wrong with me. And so I know that came out of like love and care, but it didn't help me in getting help. I think that's something that a lot of kids will deal with. And I feel like, especially like, you know, Black families and just specific, I feel like demographics will have a harder time with that. And I think too, like families that have just never themselves went through the mental health care system or anything like that. So it was a lot of different things. And then a year later went back, asked my doctor again, and then wound up getting help. So calling and everything, which was really awesome.
So there you have it. It was a long process, but he eventually did get there. And like Malik just talked about, there are so many barriers to getting help, but it is possible. Now, over the course of hearing these little pieces of advice, these tidbits from our different guests on the pod, some of them you might totally relate to. Like, yeah, I've experienced ADHD, but then other ones, ooh, depression, nope, that one does not apply to me. So this final little nugget is one that unfortunately can apply to all of us at some point, whether we like it or not, because it talks about grief. Unfortunately, at some point, we will all experience loss, unless you just like go through life without loving anything or having anything, and so then you don't care if you lose it, and that is not how we want to be. So if we want to live a life that we love, we're going to lose things that we love, and that sucks, but luckily we have wonderful people like Brennan Wood, the executive director of Dougie Center, which is the National Grief Center for Children and Families, to teach us about it.
I think that knowing that it is this process that isn't linear and that there are ups and downs, and, you know, there is this kind of perception that that it's time limited, that it looks this certain way. You know, there's still people who are holding on to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. And, you know, what we often share and what Elizabeth's foundation, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation, being run by her son, you know, and Elizabeth, even in the end of her life, was really, or the last part of her work was really geared towards letting people know that those were written actually about people who were dying. So that is, those 5 stages of grief are really around someone accepting their own mortality. It isn't around grieving the death of someone close to you. And so there aren't these linear stages that you go through. There isn't something that like you have to accomplish in order to move through your grief in a successful way. And I think that can be hard for people because they want to know what are the steps? How can I get through this as quickly as possible? And unfortunately, you know, there's no fixing grief, right? And I think in some ways that's a tough thing, but in some ways that also, I think, frees people up to really just have their experience and to honor what they're going through when they're going through it, you know, and on those days where you're having a better day, to just be in a place where you can embrace that and say, okay, you know, I think one thing that is so important to me that kids know is that they can still play and laugh, you know, and that if they're having fun, that doesn't mean that they love their person any less, you know? Yeah. And kids really can dip in and out of grief. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us, right? To be able to say, how can I be in the moment and truly honor where I'm at in that moment?
I think there's so much good stuff in what Brennan just said, that there is no timeline on grief, that there's no set way that it's going to go. You're not going to have this feeling and then this feeling, and then if you feel this one, ooh, nope, that one's wrong. They're all there. They're all acceptable, whatever you are feeling and experiencing. Especially when that comes to a point where you are experiencing joy. Like, you can have those days, even if you're feeling really sad, you can have a happy moment, you can laugh. Sometimes that feels really weird when you're grieving. I know that that's something I've experienced, but it's all okay. I mean, none of it is okay. That's the problem with grief, is that it's just not okay, but also anything you're feeling is okay. And I think that is a good note to end on, because in my opinion, that philosophy can kind of apply to all mental health struggles in general. That no, whatever you are feeling, if you're feeling really shitty right now, it is not okay. But it's also okay to not be okay. It doesn't mean it's good. I don't want you to struggle. You don't want to feel crappy, but you're not alone in that. And it's okay to feel like that, because we can make it better. And then on those days when you do feel better, you'll appreciate it extra much, because you'll remember what it felt like to not feel like that. So, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Mentally Together. And thank you to all of our wonderful guests who came on the show in 2021 and taught us so much. I'm Cassidy Quinn. I'll see you back here next time. And in the meantime, go do something nice for yourself today. Make your bed, call a friend, put your dog in a cute outfit, whatever will make your day just a little bit better. Because remember, we are all just trying to keep ourselves mentally together. Mentally Together is produced, hosted, and edited by Cassidy Quinn in collaboration with Koba FM, a podcast network that is all about community, baby.